I actually generally didn't accept the status quo as being the reason something we had to stick with. I always would question, why do we have to continue to do things the way we've always done them? Why can't we do things differently?
Welcome to Broken Benefits. I'm your host, Lee Lewis, and this is a podcast where we learn from top employer experts on how to fix our broken benefits to save lives, save dollars, and save your talent. Hey everyone, welcome to Broken Benefits. I am your host, Lee Lewis, and so excited to introduce today's guest. She is amazing. Sally Welborn is an institution in American healthcare. She ran all the benefits globally, domestically, and all healthcare for the world's largest retailer for almost a decade. She led benefits at a major Fortune 100 bank for over a decade and helped usher in and develop some of the most critical and at the time most progressive and new strategies that are used today, from medical tourism and centers of excellence to second opinions and the movement towards appropriateness. If you've experienced, heard of, or used any of those strategies, they likely started with Sally. During her tenure, she oversaw just at Walmart probably combined over $30 billion in healthcare transactions. And so excited to have her on the show today and for all of us to be able to learn from her. Sally Welborn, welcome to Broken Benefits. So excited to have you today.
Thanks, Lee. Very honored and pleased to be joining you today.
Yeah. So hopping right in here, your style and approach is different, and everyone will acknowledge this, is different than most benefits managers. I would love for you to take a moment to talk about, in your own eyes, in your own view, what are some of the ways that you approach the problem different than most?
So thanks, Lee. I think it's interesting that you say I approach things differently, and maybe it's because I was just more obnoxious from time to time about how to solve the problems. But I usually, so a couple of things that I would point out. First is, I actually generally didn't accept the status quo as being the reason something we had to stick with. I always would question, why do we have to continue to do things the way we've always done them? Why can't we do things differently? So that's the first thing. The second thing, and it's sort of aligned with that, is I also I never assumed that the way to solve things had to be using the status quo incumbents. And I usually would think about, how else can I solve this problem if the incumbents are not solving the problem? And that at its core is the probably the differentiator is that I didn't I first would look at the incumbents, and when the incumbents weren't solving a problem, I figured out how to get around it.
Everyone, now just a quick word from today's sponsor.
Mom, are you crying?
No, sweetie. Just some allergies. Come here. Let's go play. Come on.
1 in 4 Americans had trouble paying a recent medical bill. Many of these people affected work for companies just like yours. Start giving your employees 100% medical coverage with Catalyze Health.
If we're trying to do the same strategies with the same partners, with the same objectives and expect something new, it's not real sustainable. What do you think is a common kind of mistake in the way that we are generally approaching healthcare? That, man, if you could steer the whole industry in one area, what would it be?
So if we're just thinking healthcare specifically and not broad benefits, right? So
Yeah.
I think when we talk about healthcare as employers, so it's actually much bigger than employers, but employer purchasing in healthcare.
Yeah.
I think that we always so there's two fatal flaws. But don't always have to be fatal flaws. Number one is, we don't have to always look for a silver bullet, but sometimes there are silver bullets. that might make a difference. And the other fatal flaw is not thinking about something other than how is this going to be easier? Because things don't have to be easier. Sometimes things aren't easier. Sometimes it's harder. And if we think about that, the point of healthcare is getting people back to full health, meaning improved health. And there's an element of keeping them healthy and avoiding ill health. If we keep focusing on that and not let perfection be the enemy of the good, meaning perfection being, oh, we can't solve for better quality because it might disrupt a member. Oh, we can't solve for elimination of inappropriate care because it's going to annoy the providers, right? So we let
Right.
other factors it limit us instead of saying, what is it we really are trying to solve for? Be aware of what those limiters are and mitigate them, but don't let them be the reason not to keep moving forward to fix the core problem, which is we have too much inappropriate care, we have lack of quality care, and we spend way too much on care.
Yes. Yes. I love that. How, a follow-up question on that. It's okay. Um, so I know there's a lot of bad care out there. Uh, I want to fix it. How do I find the good stuff? Because there's a million people out kind of purveying different types of solutions that can tell me where to find, better providers, right? Better cost, better safety, better quality, better appropriateness, better invasiveness. Um, how do I know which one to use? And maybe I shouldn't be so picky. And once I do, how do I help my members to get there?
Lee, so the short answer is it's not an easy answer.
Yeah.
And there are some solutions in the marketplace now that can help you get to that answer. Don't feel like you have to solve for all of that in the beginning. I think a good place to start is identify the worst providers and eliminate them from your networks. And you can do that through some pretty basic things like using leapfrog data, right? Leapfrog has indicating which hospitals are literally unsafe for you to go to. So I think, focusing on eliminating some of the lower providers is a place to start. And then if you want to begin to be a little bit more intentional around identifying the higher quality providers, there are solutions that are out there. And I'll give a few, but I don't want to imply that these are the only ones because this is a rapidly evolving marketplace and someone might see this presentation 6 months from now and somebody else has come along. So don't infer that this is all that there is, but there are companies like Embold Health that can create lists of better providers in a marketplace. Garner Health, similar kind of a solution. There are centers of excellence providers such as Carum Health, Bridge, which is now part of Transcarent, Employer Direct, Edison Health, where they have identified the best surgeons and doctors for particular kinds of procedures. So there are organizations out there that can help you identify the best in class providers. And you can surround them then with solutions within your benefit plan because it's one thing to find them, it's another thing for your employees and patients to go there. So then you have the next step, which it's not just finding them, it's how to put a benefit plan around that to get members to them.
Right. What, you know, what did you do? You had arguably the most challenging population to try and educate and steer. You have executives all the way down to the most entry level of entry level. You're not a concentrated population. Everybody knows you're in every city, every town, every rural jurisdiction. how in the world do you engage and communicate to a population like that?
So you're speaking of my time at Walmart. So
Yes, I'm referring,
and
yeah.
yeah, and so at Walmart, you're 100% right. And so the challenge is, how do you make it so that you don't have to communicate? This is one of those things that I've continued to learn and struggle with, to be very honest. It is a continual struggle in the employee benefits world,
Mm.
which is, how do you eliminate the need that the person that is the user of the program or benefit needs to be communicated to and trained and learn what to do. So how can I make it where it's automatic, so that if they enter the system, things happen automatically? So I
Mm,
don't have a foolproof answer to that, but that
yeah.
is where I would object. I always I One of my team would if they were hearing this, would remember, one of my least favorite things is a benefit plan that has a gotcha, right? Oh,
Yes.
if you had read that email I sent to you, or that postcard I sent you, you would have known that if you go to that provider over there, it would have cost you less money. Well, no, we can't have a system that requires users of the system to have to know every rule. Like, does it not annoy you when you didn't know the rules around your cell phone service plan, right? So how do we make it so that you don't the communication is awareness, but it's more a situation of, I don't need to communicate to them everything about it. It's just built into the process. If they go to their doctor, it's going to work for them. They enter the system, it's going to work for them. So I'm not giving you a great answer here, but I think
No,
it's
this is
where I've
great.
always been striving for, which is how to make it so it's less it's less critical, that they know what the rule is. Now, you can't always avoid that. And I will tell you that our Centers of Excellence program that we did at Walmart is one of those where at some point at some point, with healthcare trend going the way it is in this year, 2022, 23, right? There will be times when you're going to have to say, if you're going to be in this system, this is what you have to do. And there are going to be things that, you have to be in this narrow network. You have to use these COEs. How do we make it so if they enter the system, that they know that they're going to go wherever they go, that they're in the right system? It's going to be a challenge. It's going to continue to be a challenge. We learned that through our COEs. Um, Giving people a choice, incentivizing them works a while, but at some point you have to make things the rule. And if you break the rule, then
Right.
yeah, there's a gotcha, but you try to avoid those.
Sometimes, you know, in the world of carrots and sticks, I sometimes characterize it as, forget carrots and sticks, just build corrals. So you're just walking through. You can throw some carrots in there if you want, that's fine. But if you just know where to go and make it so that you can't go wrong, um, not to take away people's autonomy, but honestly, sometimes I just want to know where to go. And
Yeah.
that's way better than anything else. Is I don't want to have to think about it. I don't want to have to learn it. And that's what I'm hearing from you in terms of, yeah, like make it good design. A good program can be an invisible one, so that we don't have to communicate it. I love that. If you make a smart enough system, your users don't have to be that smart. You're, you know, you help to spot a ton of these major trends. You even created some of these. How do you spot trends? What's your process? And I know some of it's just luck, but what process do you use, and how do you identify something that you know is going to be hot?
You know, I don't think that I ever look for what's hot.
Okay,
And I don't,
that's great.
I think if I look back at the things that I did, what I did was, I identified two alternative paths. One is I identified something that needed to be fixed, and I went out and created something to fix it. Or two, I heard about something that was unique and different, and I thought that it might be something that could make a difference. So it was not like I was, identifying something that was already a wave, right? And saying,
Mhm.
oh, that's really one of those waves that's going to make it all the way to the shore. I was actually looking for what's out there pretty far deep, that's beginning a little ripple, that I think has the possibility of making a real difference. So I'm going to stop on that analogy because I'll butcher it here if I go any further with it. But
Good.
here's the example I'm going to give on that.
Uh,
I'll give two examples actually because they're so pertinent. One is consumer directed healthcare.
Yep.
And so there was this guy, right? Tony Miller is his name now. I'm not, people know his name now, but at the time, nobody knew his name really. Tony Miller happened to come to us when I was at Wells Fargo and said, I believe healthcare is broken, and I believe I have an idea about how to fix it. And I believe that consumers being a part of the solution is how to fix healthcare. And I and my team listened to it, and we walked away and said, that really makes some sense to us. So we kind of did some due diligence, and then we started testing it and trying it, and we learned from it. It seemed like, and so I mean that was the beginning. This was in early 2000s, probably. Yeah, early 2000s. And we tested it and tried it, and yes, it was the beginning of a wave that continues to be a trend. I will say in retrospect that some of the early ideas about what it was supposed to do got completely messed up by impacts, by changes that were made by IRS rules, by federal government getting into it, by a lot of other things that caused by employers doing dumb things with it. So in the end, while I take a lot of pride in the fact that we were part of the handful of companies that began that trend. I think in retrospect, what we learned is interesting in that sometimes you can start things that seem good on paper, but if they're not wisely managed, they can really go awry.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't make you stop trying.
Right.
So I think that's the number one thing. The number two example I would give then is transparency.
Yeah.
So that was another one where early on, and I will give our colleague Sean Levitt, may rest in peace, credit for really quote shining the light on the fact that this lack of transparency in healthcare. We all knew about it, but he was passionate about really eliminating some of the opacity. And because of his drive, a company called Castlight was created. And that was the beginning of the transparency move. And so early on, when I was hearing him talk about it, it was like, that makes so much sense. And it, again, continued down this, my intent at the time was that people could be consumers of healthcare, and consumers could really change healthcare. So, that was the beginning of that trend. It was, every time, my employer would do these things. And then when we did it, I would get the early indications of success, and I would become pretty vocal about it and share it with my colleagues and friends, and probably helps, drive that wave, so to speak. But you got to continue to look and see, is it working? Is it not? What we learned was that transparency on cost alone is only a piece of it. It doesn't solve everything. What we learned is that, and this is what I have really come to learn over the last 5 or 7 years, which is that people can be consumers. Patients, it's very hard for a patient to be a consumer. So people, when we're making our decisions at open enrollment, right, we're pretty rational. It's money, it's dollars and cents. It's a pretty rational decision, and we can be a pretty good consumer. I mean, the data would show us that you can be a pretty good consumer during open enrollment.
Yes.
When you're a patient and you are at the point of, first of all, you got something wrong with you or your family or something, right?
That's right.
So are you really going to be thinking as rationally as you do in other scenarios? Number two, there is this phenomenon, particularly in healthcare, around the white coat syndrome, right? So when you're a patient, the asymmetry of knowledge, even though we give you a piece of knowledge, such as price transparency, the asymmetry of the rest of the world of healthcare
Mhm.
knowledge is so out of whack. It's almost impossible for a patient to be a true consumer. And so that's coming back full circle to what I was talking about earlier, which is how do you just
Mm.
put it in front of me so that if I enter the system, I don't have to make all the decisions,
That's right.
that I'm being directed and helped. If I want to make decisions, if I want to make choices, right? That's great. But when I don't want to make choices, I don't want to, or I'm uncomfortable with, or don't feel fully, um, I'm not comfortable with it, then I just need to have somebody help me figure it out.
That's right. Almost make the white coat syndrome work for us. I was jotting that down as a thought of, hey, if we can empower, through say primary care or other providers, maybe through telemedicine or whatever it might be, if we can empower those providers who are working with people and solving problems to refer to the right kinds of places and to value it, it almost can fix that because you're right. We're not making that go away anytime soon. What do you think are the biggest opportunities that you're excited about today? What are some of what's coming next?
So it's a great question. Um, I think what is coming next, I mean, this is going to sound awful, but
Yeah.
I actually think the fact that there is a healthcare cost trend increase will cause employers to start looking deeper into their health plan and into healthcare. So what I'm excited about is the fact that there are solutions there are ways to fix, not fix, bad word. There are ways to address some of that healthcare trend. And so I am more excited about some of the things that I talked about, which is programs that eliminate the need for patients to, or make it easier for patients to identify best, um, or get to better quality care, best quality care, right? So it's
Mm.
not for them to find it, but for them to get to it. Some of the things like I was talking about, like in the provider identification area, the centers of excellence,
Right.
those are the ones that I think have the other part, though, I think we need to be extremely aware of and concerned about the PBM area, right? Not the PBM,
Yes,
the drug side, right?
that's
I was
right.
just reading an article today about the GLP-1s and the G1Ps or GLPs,
Right.
all of those
Weight loss.
new solutions that are in, well, they're actually type 1, they're diabetes programs or
Right.
diabetes drugs that are being that a side effect almost is that they cause weight loss. So it's a good side effect, right?
Right.
But they're super expensive. Number one. Number two, once you get off of them, you gain all of your weight back often. So I was just reading this article today, and it's wonderful to be able to solve for helping people with diabetes, but and it's wonderful to help them lose weight because there are other things that go along with positive with going losing weight. But how can
Right.
employers continue to pay an annuity of thousands of dollars per month for some of these drugs? And so
Forever.
forever, forever. Well, until the federal government starts,
Right.
until they go on Medicare, right? So I think some of the solutions that are out there that number one will look at not just those, but other drugs where they are annuity type drugs that maybe are so expensive, um, and try to assess only making sure that they're only provided to the patient where that is the
Mhm.
last resource, and or how do we solve for prices of drugs, not cost of drug, but the price of drugs being extraordinary and exorbitant compared to actual cost of the R&D and production of the drug, right?
Absolutely. I love that comment that annuity drugs, I've never thought of them that way, but annuity drugs are a danger really that is an innovation really an innovation if it is empirically and impossibly unaffordable? And I almost think, you know, uh, keep working on it until you can make it keep working on it until you can make it affordable and accessible, because if you're going to bankrupt the country with it, you're releasing a devil or making a deal with one as much as you're innovating something.
Exactly.
Changing topics a little bit, you have always been fearless about pushing carriers. Um, and I want to caveat that because some people would cynically say, oh, well, she's well known and she had all the buying power in the world. But really, as we all know, even large employers, if they don't approach it right, they still get told no plenty by the insurance carrier vendors, right? And PBMs. What are what are like the three most important things that we need to be demanding from our carriers, and we can throw PBMs in there as well?
Yeah. I think the first thing is to ask these monolithic, um, olig- oligopoly type service providers to not protect, not focus on protecting their asset, which is their providers, or their, in the case of PBMs, their drug makers, right?
Right.
I think that the first thing you can tell them is start focusing on the patient and quality of care. And then let's, given the role that you have in society, let's let your ability to impact quality of care and health outcomes drive your commercial success. I mean, we are in America, right? This is, a capitalistic society. They deserve the opportunity for commercial success. But let's flip the flip the reason that they need to be rewarded for commercial success by having better quality. So can we challenge them to focus on quality and not just shareholder value? Can we challenge them? I would challenge them to stop protecting their provider networks because they are not helping the situation.
Mhm.
And the third thing I would say is I experienced this personally directly, and that is that most health plans have account managers that are on the ground talking to their customers.
Mm.
And the account managers, to be honest, are rarely listened to because they are just a voice for their customer, and the customer is not listened to. So that's the other thing. I used to just rail on the health plans about, I told your account manager about this. Why aren't you listening to your account managers? I was an account manager and talked about it, and they didn't listen to me. So I think that is like the other thing. But the other, so here's the thing, right? Just, you can't stop asking for things from the carriers. Keep
Great.
asking for them. Don't just say, oh, the carrier said no. Like, okay, well, keep asking, because
Right.
they it, it can't just be a few of us that ask. It has to be everybody asking for it.
Everyone, now just a quick word from today's sponsor.
Lemonade for 50 cents. It's for a good cause.
This situation seems terrible, right? Well, what if I told you it actually happened in the United States in 2021? These are the families of people who work for companies just like yours. Give your employees 100% medical coverage with Catalyze Health.
The market only delivers what the customer demands. And if customers aren't demanding anything, we'll never get any change at all. You're you're exactly right. How how do you hold your carrier accountable? So you worked with every carrier, and you're familiar with them intimately. What is it that employers are missing there?
The 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 real and perceived threat of walking away. There is too many times, I think that the fear of change is probably the biggest barrier that most employee benefits leaders have. The fear of rocking a boat, making members have to change their PBM because, oh my gosh, they're going to have to resubmit their claims. I mean, it's a big deal. I'm not going to minimize it. It's a big deal. But if we don't continue to hold these service providers accountable and say, look, we will change and do it sometimes, we'll never get their attention.
A great point. Almost that everybody should always have their alternative ready to go. Always.
Exactly. And it's fraught with danger because I can remember two really, really distinct ones, one with Walmart, one with Wells Fargo, both, where I was making a bold move and trying to eliminate a big incumbent. And things happen, right? There are business relationships that come back. And as much of a bully as I wanted to be sometimes there were bigger bullies. And as a benefits leader, sometimes you just have to go, okay, you know what? This is a business decision. And if the company wants to continue to spend X millions of dollars more because there are business reasons on a different part of the business, okay, I can understand that. But you can't, don't assume that that's a problem first. Try for the change first.
It's great. It's terrific advice. A lot of people don't realize that when you're a huge employer, it's sometimes a disadvantage to innovation and agility. It's like, oh, well, if I was a small employer, I could try that. But because I'm big, and small employers never get this. How do you, as a large employer, run small tests and still maintain some of that agility? You were famous for being able to do so as arguably the most encumbered large employer in the country.
So interesting that you say that because truly, we rarely ran tests and pilots because it was almost always as hard to implement something, nationwide as it is to just implement something for a small fraction. So we typically, I was not we weren't big, we didn't run pilots often. I mean, from time to time we would, um, by, subsetting geographic areas or things like that. But
It's
it
great.
wasn't like I was doing a lot of test and learn.
Yeah. So
I did.
how did you try something new then? Because I mean, when you're trying something new, a non-zero percentage of the time things go horribly wrong, and you obviously would have needed to protect against that. How did you bring these kind of new strategies to light when, you know, it was going to hit the whole country simultaneously?
So I think the thing to keep in mind is that, and I will admit to not always being perfect at this, but
Yeah,
once you get, so you have to, I mean, every benefits leader has to get approvals for whatever you're going to do. If you're going to do it nationwide, right, you got to get approvals.
sure.
So the best defense is to make sure that your executives know everything that can go wrong. Now
Mm,
that's where, so if they
mm.
know everything that can go wrong and you're watching for those things that can go wrong, and when they do start to go wrong, then you quickly pivot, right?
This is great
And
advice.
but the reality is it's that challenge. So where I admit that, it's hard to identify everything that can go wrong and
Right.
make sure that everybody knows, because there's all of a sudden amnesia. Corporate amnesia happens often. I
Sure.
remember that PowerPoint I showed you where these things can happen, right? So yeah, I mean, corporate amnesia will happen. And the reality is also being able to be strong enough to say either I, yes, this is what we shared with you. This is what's happening. This is how we're going to solve for it. Um, or being strong enough to say, hang with me, we're going to get there, because sometimes that short-term pain is worth
Right.
it for the long term. I mean, even I'll tell you, one of the most traumatic changes I made wasn't in healthcare. It was changing a PTO plan, changing a vacation plan.
Really?
Transition was awful, and it was giving people more and better, but it was, it went horribly wrong. It went horribly awry because people, they complained about not being able to use all that we gave them. And so therefore it was a loss. I mean, it was just this crazy, crazy thing. But I see your eyes. Yeah. So,
Incredible.
so,
Okay, so
things can go wrong. You just got to continue to be strong through it, and then figure when it goes so misunderstood that you go, okay, that's fine. We'll modify.
this is incredible sort of risk mitigation anyway. I'm just thinking like, oh my gosh, this would be so useful really in any area is whenever you're taking action on something, think of everything that can go wrong, make a list, and then write down what the signs would be that things are headed in that direction so you can isolate your early warning system. That's so smart. And then, writing it down and making it clear to leadership in order to hedge the risk, plan appropriately, and be prepared so that you can launch more broadly. It's funny you mentioned that too. I got an echo. We mentioned Sean Levitt earlier. When Sean, I had the chance to, I was, he was my client for a little while. It was sort of my first early break in my career. And he would say the same thing. He's like, we actually don't really run that many pilots because it's as much work as going broadly. I mean, we might phase it in over time, but we didn't think of them as pilots. We just prepare and then we get ready to cancel quickly because not everything works. Um, I love that concept. How would you sell programs internally? Like you said, you got to get approval from all these stakeholders. Sometimes that's really hard in benefits, especially if funds are tight and you've got, a persnickety CFO.
I didn't. So, the only time I could think about when I sold a program that was going to be additional cost was trying to sell, adding like a health risk assessment, wellness program, at one of my former employers. And I don't, I will, in retrospect, not say that I did a great job on that, but I would, it's the same thing. You've got to go, it's the socialization, all of the actuarial analysis of what is the possibility of it working, and having a smart actuary on your side is really key to success too.
Hmm.
Um, and so I don't think there was anything magic about what I did. It's the classic things about socialization and making people aware of it and knowing, what the possibilities would be. But I will honestly say that I don't think I sold many things where because of a budget being tight, I was told no. Because most of the time what I was trying to sell, quote sell, was I don't want I need to not do things as aggressively. So business leaders think the way to solve healthcare costs to the company is to increase premiums, increase deductibles, increase out of
Right.
pocket. And so often what you're trying to do is say, I, I, I would rather not do that. And in lieu of that, I would like to add these other programs that I think will solve for reducing healthcare costs. So, but that's a different kind of a conversation than, oh, we should add, you know, an MSK program for physical therapy and it's going to cost X, because you're not actually adding cost. You actually should be saying we're going to save
Mhm.
this by doing X, and it's not an added benefit. Now, that's not true if you were adding something like, say, company paid childcare, or
Sure.
there are a lot of other benefits that cost money. But if you're doing something in healthcare, it
Right.
ought to be an additional cost because there's going to be a concomitant reduction in overall cost.
I think people miss that a lot, and I think that's brilliant. It's saying, look, rather than saying, "Hey, I really want to put in this transparency program, or I really want to try this center of excellence program," it's gonna. Oh, how much will it cost? Like you've already now gotten yourself into a debate. Like you're playing tic tac toe, and you let the other person go first. Like no, 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 no. It's hey, costs are going up this much. One way to handle that is to raise deductibles, but I don't think our labor force is going to love that. So here's an alternative, costs the same to us as increasing or enduring this huge lift, but this one would actually get better outcomes for our people and would be an alternative to that ought to reduce impact. I think that's a great way to approach it. But you start with, hey, here's a problem that whether we like it or not, it's happening. And here's some different ways to, to approach it. I love that as an idea. What, um, how do you get kind of I don't know, did you ever have to talk internal leaders into, you know, taking on more risk or allowing you to be able to take more risk? And how do you manage up in that way if that's something that you had to do?
The short answer is yes. I did have to um, ha- get leaders to align with taking risk, and sometimes taking risk. It typically was around something like taking a risk to change from one PBM to the other, because in their mind that was a huge risk, right?
Right.
So I think it comes back to the same comments around, ensuring that they know of all the liabilities of potential liabilities, et cetera. And so you're working through that.
How do we choose
I
a
think,
good vendor? Oh, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, how do we choose a good vendor? There's a million of them out there. What are the ways that you sort of sniff out those that are going to be successful and that can make a difference?
So I think for the first of all, um, having a good actuary on your side, and when I mean good, I mean someone who understands how you think about things and how you want them to think about things. Because actuarial science is actually not science; it's actuarial art, to be honest. And there's a lot of different ways to think about things, and so be sure that your actuary is thinking about things the way you want them to think about it.
Uh,
Um, I think that you are looking for it has to be something that you can intellectually just get your head behind. This makes sense, right? And
right.
the way that they do their business makes sense and it feels right. And then make sure that there is a cultural alignment with the way that they deliver their services with your organization. And then
Mm,
finally, the final thing is, and I would see, I recall two very, very, very distinct times that this came to play. When we found two vendors that were basically even up on what it was they were going to deliver, their potential outcomes, their value, everything was it was pretty, and we were really struggling with how to choose between these two vendors, and I've been two very distinct cases. And our tipping point was, which one of them do we feel is more culturally aligned with my organization? Where the
mm,
leaders, the executives at that company, if I have a conversation with them and say, this is what we're thinking, they're going to understand it. They're going to know, they're going to be there. They will have already thought about things that way. So I think having a company that is delivering things in a culturally appropriate for your corporation, right? But
right.
also the way they think at a business level is aligned with the way that you think culturally.
I love that. And one of the main things that we ought to consider, and one of the last things asked in an RFP, maybe even never, is sort of the way that you think about business and the problem. That's such a great
I'm
insight.
not sure that ever would be asked or answered appropriately in an RFP. It's one of those things you get in the finalist meetings.
That makes sense. In the RFPs, you have some person getting paid a few dollars an hour copying and pasting out of an answer bank. It's probably not the place you get it. Well, hey, this has been absolutely a treasure trove of information. Thank you so much for your time today. If somebody wanted to reach out to you or connect with you, where's a place where they can find you?
I'm on LinkedIn every day.
Okay,
Sally Welborn, one L and two L's in Sally, one L in Welborn.
marvelous. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been terrific, and thanks, listeners. If this has been valuable, please send this to a friend or an associate so they can learn as well. Thanks for joining us on Broken Benefits. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or on your favorite podcasting platform. Also, please share today's show with a friend or colleague. It's free to do, and it helps us spread the message to as many people as possible. Until next time.